I thought I was strong. I thought I was smart. I thought I knew exactly what I was doing when I stayed with him one more day, then one more week, then one more year. But the real question isn't why I stayed. The real question is why my brain was wired to make leaving feel like dying. You see, when people ask why women stay in relationships that clearly aren't serving them, they're asking the wrong question entirely. They think it's about weakness or low self-esteem or not knowing your worth. But that's not even scratching the surface of what's actually happening in your nervous system, in your brain chemistry, in the invisible threads that tie you to someone even when every logical part of you knows you should walk away. The truth is so much darker and so much more scientific than anyone wants to admit. And once you understand it, you'll see why beating yourself up for staying was never fair in the first place. Let me take you inside what was really happening in my body every single time I thought about leaving him. My hands would start shaking. My chest would tighten. This wave of panic would wash over me that felt exactly like dying, and I'm not being dramatic. Your brain cannot tell the difference between actual physical death and the death of a deeply bonded attachment. When you've been with someone long enough, when you've created enough memories and routines and shared experiences, your brain literally codes that person as necessary for your survival. It's the same mechanism that keeps babies attached to mothers, even abusive mothers, because in our evolutionary past, separation from your primary attachment figure meant death. A baby alone in the wilderness dies, and even though you're a grown woman living in a modern world, your limbic system hasn't gotten the memo. This is where it gets really interesting and really dark at the same time. Every time he did something that hurt me, every time he was cold or dismissive or cruel, my stress response system would activate. Cortisol would flood my body. My nervous system would go into threat mode. And then when he'd come back and be sweet again, when he'd give me just enough warmth and attention and affection to bring me back from the edge, my brain would release a massive hit of dopamine and oxytocin. That combination is more addictive than cocaine. Literally. There are studies on this. The neurochemical pattern of intermittent reinforcement, of punishment followed by reward, of pain followed by relief, creates some of the strongest addiction pathways the human brain can form. So every time I thought I was being weak for staying, what was actually happening was that I was fighting against millions of years of evolutionary wiring, plus a neurochemical addiction pattern that had been strengthened every single day for years. The pattern worked like this. He would withdraw his attention or his affection. My nervous system would interpret this as a survival threat. I would feel anxious, desperate, clingy, trying to get him to come back. Then when he'd finally give me a crumb of warmth, the relief was so intense, the dopamine hit was so strong that my brain learned one single lesson. When he comes back, the pain stops. When he gives you attention, you feel safe again. Therefore, his attention equals survival. Do you see how insidious this is? And here's what nobody tells you about trauma bonding, because that's what this is. That's the technical term for what I'm describing. It doesn't require dramatic abuse. It doesn't require physical violence or screaming fights or anything that would make outsiders concerned. It just requires inconsistency. It just requires someone who is sometimes available and sometimes not, sometimes warm and sometimes cold, sometimes present and sometimes distant. That inconsistency alone is enough to activate your attachment system in a desperate, anxious way. Your brain becomes hypervigilant, always scanning for signs that he's pulling away, always trying to figure out what you did wrong, always attempting to be perfect enough that he'll stay close. This hypervigilance keeps you in a low-level state of stress all the time, which means you're operating from your survival brain instead of your thinking brain. When you're in survival mode, you can't make good decisions. You literally can't. The prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for executive function and rational decision-making and future planning, goes offline when you're in a chronic stress state. Instead, you're being run by your amygdala, your fear center, which has one single goal, which is to keep you alive right now in this moment. And if your amygdala has learned that staying close to him equals safety and leaving him equals death, it will do everything in its power to keep you attached. It will rationalize. It will minimize. It will convince you that things aren't that bad, or that you're being too sensitive, or that everyone has problems, or that you'll never find anyone better, or that you're too old or too damaged, or too whatever to start over. This is why leaving feels impossible even when staying feels unbearable. You're not choosing between a bad relationship and a good life. You're choosing between the familiar pain you know how to survive and the unknown terror of being alone. And your nervous system will pick familiar pain every single time because at least you know you've survived it before. The unknown feels dangerous. Your brain doesn't care if you're happy. Your brain only cares if you're alive. And if staying with him has kept you alive so far, your brain will fight you every step of the way if you try to leave. Now, let me tell you what else was happening that I didn't understand at the time. He knew exactly what he was doing. Maybe not consciously. Maybe he couldn't have written it out like I'm explaining it to you now. But on some instinctive level, he understood that keeping me slightly off balance, keeping me unsure of where I stood with him, keeping me working for his approval, that was how he maintained control. Men like this, and I promise you he's not unique, they have an intuitive understanding of attachment dynamics. They know that if they're too consistently loving, you'll feel secure and then you won't need them as desperately. They know that if they're too consistently terrible, you'll eventually leave. But if they can find that sweet spot where they're just good enough to keep you hoping and just bad enough to keep you anxious, you'll stay forever trying to earn the consistent love they'll never actually give you. The cruelest part is that the harder you tried, the more distant he became. Because your anxiety, your need for reassurance, your attempts to get close to him, all of that activated his avoidant attachment style. People with avoidant attachment, and this is crucial to understand, they associate closeness with loss of self. Intimacy feels suffocating to them. So the more you reached for him, the more he pulled away. And the more he pulled away, the more anxious you became. And the more anxious you became, the more you reached for him. This is called the anxious avoidant trap, and it's one of the most painful relationship dynamics that exists because both people are suffering, but in completely opposite ways. And neither person can give the other what they need without betraying their own nervous system. I want you to really sit with this for a second because this is the part that changed everything for me. You weren't staying because you were weak or stupid or broken. You were staying because your attachment system was doing exactly what it evolved to do, which is keep you bonded to your primary attachment figure no matter what. The problem is that evolution didn't anticipate modern relationships. Evolution didn't anticipate that you'd have options. Evolution didn't anticipate that survival wouldn't actually depend on staying with one person. Your brain is still running software from 10,000 years ago, and that software is telling you that leaving him means certain death. So how do you override it? How do you leave when every cell in your body is screaming at you to stay? You can't logic your way out of a nervous system problem. You can't think your way out of a trauma bond. You have to do something much harder and much slower. You have to create safety in your body without him. You have to prove to your nervous system over and over and over again that you can survive and even thrive without his attention, without his approval, without his presence. This means building other attachment relationships. Friendships where you feel seen and valued, family connections where you feel safe, maybe therapy where you learn to regulate your own nervous system instead of outsourcing that job to him. And here's what nobody tells you about the process of leaving. It doesn't happen all at once. You don't just wake up one day and walk out the door. You leave in tiny increments. You leave a little bit in your mind first, allowing yourself to imagine a life without him, without immediately shutting down that thought in terror. You leave a little bit in your daily routine, creating space and activities and relationships that don't include him. You leave a little bit in your body, practicing staying regulated when he withdraws instead of immediately going into panic mode. You leave a little bit in your heart, slowly withdrawing the investment you've been pouring into someone who can't or won't meet you halfway. And then one day, after you've left in all these small, invisible ways, the physical act of leaving doesn't feel like death anymore. It feels like finally coming home to yourself. If this is resonating with you, if you're seeing your own relationship in what I'm describing, I need you to do something for me right now. Drop a comment and just write, "I see it now," because I want you to know that you're not alone in this. That thousands of women are watching this video and recognizing themselves in this pattern, and that recognition is the first step toward freedom. You don't have to explain or justify or tell your whole story. Just let me know you're here and you're starting to understand what's really been happening. Your comment might be exactly what another woman needs to see to realize she's not crazy and she's not weak and there's actually a way out of this. The reality is that understanding the neuroscience doesn't make it hurt less, at least not at first. Sometimes it hurts more because now you can't lie to yourself anymore. Now you can't pretend that if you just love him better or try harder or figure out the right thing to say, everything will be okay. Now you know that the problem isn't you and it isn't really even him. The problem is the dynamic, the pattern, the dance you've been doing together that keeps both of you locked in suffering. And the only way to stop dancing is to leave the floor entirely. You deserve a relationship where you feel safe. Not safe like you've managed to avoid triggering his withdrawal today, but safe like you can be fully yourself and know you'll still be loved. Safe like you can express a need without it being used against you later. Safe like you can relax instead of constantly monitoring and managing and trying to be perfect. That kind of safety exists, but you will never find it with someone who needs your anxiety to feel in control. You will never find it with someone who confuses your nervous system activation with passion. You will never find it with someone who has learned that the best way to keep you is to keep you slightly afraid of losing him. And if you found value in this video, if something shifted for you while you were watching, do me a favor and hit that like button so more women can find this information. Subscribe to this channel because I'm going to keep making videos that tell you the truth about relationship dynamics that nobody else wants to talk about. The uncomfortable truth, the dark truth, the truth that might hurt to hear but will ultimately set you free. You're not here by accident. You're here because some part of you knows it's time to stop settling for crumbs and start building the life you actually deserve. And I'm here to help you do exactly that.